Hello, and welcome to the State of Tennessee Department of Finance and Administration, Office of Criminal Justice Program, SASP Annual Reporting Training. Today, we are going through the SASP Annual Output Progress Report. This is an annual report that is once a year, due by July 31st, so mark those calendars. You're going to only report on grant-funded activities, so any SASP-funded projects or activities should be the only things that you are reporting on for this report. If you have more than one SASP project, you will report on both of those projects in one reporting form. If your reported number should reflect any prorated amounts if funds are only partially paid or for staff time, service, or a product. So if you have staff that are only partially paid, those reporting numbers should also be prorated to reflect that. I'm going to go through the report in just a minute with everyone. And you will see in some questions there are going to be an other category. This is a last option. Please try not to use that other category unless it is absolutely necessary. The categories don't have to be a perfect fit for your response. It really just has to be similar to whatever the description of that existing category is. So try and find this most similar in that category. If there's really nothing that fits, then you can use that other category. So let's go through the report. This is what your SASP report will look like. You will receive this report from your OCJP program manager prior to reporting. In the beginning of the report is instructions. I highly recommend to go through that, especially if you've never done this report before. The first section is pretty straightforward information. Your current reporting period is going to be January 1st through December 31st of your reporting year. Subgrantee name is going to be the agency name. So whatever agency you are filling this out for and has the SASP contract with OCJP, that will go here. Here is going to be your contract number. So your subgrantee numbers are your contract numbers. So whatever your SASP contract number is, you're going to put that number right here. You can always ask your OCJP program manager for assistance if you get confused while you're completing this form as well. Type of funded organization is just the type of organization that you are. Most of the folks who are receiving our SASP fundings are probably going to be a dual program or a sexual assault program, but it could be any of these. Your point of contact is going to be the individual who's listed as the project director in your contract. So that's where you're going to put all the information for this is whatever their contact is. That's what you're going to fill in here. Staff information. Before we get into that, you're going to notice this area right here on the report. Each question or each section of the report is going to ask you basically like, did SASP program funds pay staff? If the answer is no, you're going to go all the way, you're going to skip section A and go all the way to section B. If the answer is yes, you're going to fill out everything in section A. So for staff, you're going to report the total number of full-time equivalent staff, FTE for short, that is funded by your SASP program. So you're going to report staff by the functions performed, not necessarily the title or location of their of what their job title is. We'll go into a little bit later on how to calculate these and examples of what that looks like. Once again, there's pretty limited staffing. So you want to do the job function that the SASP funds are providing funding for. Purpose area is whatever purpose area your SASP contract is there to do. So you will check all that apply. Did your SASP funds provide funding to create any kind of informational materials, print materials, training materials, etc.? If so, you will input all that information in section C. If not, you will go down to section D, victim services. In section D, you're going to have two sections, Section 11A and 11B. 11A is going to be victims that you serve, so individuals who received services that they requested. And those services were funded by your SASP program. Partially served are going to be clients who received some sort of service or no service at all. Um, if those services were, and if they were to receive them, they would have been SAS program services. You'll have secondary victims here, so that includes individuals that are not the primary victim and that are not the perpetrator. So that could be siblings, parents, grandparents, loved ones, intimate partners, those type of things. Question number 13 talks more about how reasons that individuals may have only been partially served or not served at all. So this happens, right? Sometimes you have individuals who may not be fit for your services. They may not fit they may not be victims of sexual assault, so therefore they cannot receive those SAS services, or they themselves only came to one appointment and you were never able to follow back up. Those things happen, right? So this is just check all that apply that may lead to individuals not having access or ability to complete and fulfill all the services provided in your SAS program. Demographics of clients served, pretty straightforward. This is all and then this is victims and relationships to the offenders by victimization. I'm sure most of y'all are including that information in your intake, so that's where you would find these numbers. Victim services. So these are going to be number of victims served or clients served for each type of service that your SASPs fund. Hotline calls, information, outreach, orders of protection. Question number 20 is an optional question. It is not required. However, if you do want to add additional information about how your program is effectively serving clients, there is an option for you to be able to do that in question number 20. And then after 20 is going to be all of your narrative portion of the report. So how do I calculate FTEs? So once again, FTEs is full-time equivalent for staff. You're going to only report those FTEs that are funded with SASP funds. You're not reporting any in-kind staff or volunteers. Calculating FTE. Calculations of FTE should be based on a 52-week, 12-month reporting period. So an example of this is 2,080 working hours in a 12-month reporting period equals to 1 FTE. 1 FTE is equal to 40 hours per week, or whatever is considered by full-time by your organization. The reported FTE must be in decimals and not percentages, and should always reflect the job function performed by the staff, not necessarily their job title or job location. This slide is just a great example on how you can reference determining those FTE numbers. So you can kind of look at how you can calculate those FTEs based on the number of hours worked for that job duty that SASP is funding. So what about on-call folks? Estimate the average of what a full-time advocate is paid for an annual salary in your state or area, and then use that as the base for estimating the FTE using the total amount you paid out of stipends. So an example of that looks like, say an average salary for a full-time advocate is about $40,000, and you spent $20,000 in stipends for on-call. This will translate to 0.50 FTE victim advocate. Some additional examples for FTEs. A rape crisis center received a SASP grant that was used to fund only a third of full-time advocate salary for an entire 12-month reporting period. So you would do a third of that victim advocate, which would be 0.33. State Sexual Assault Coalition received a SASP grant used to fund full-time staff person who spent approximately 20 hours a week leading a support group for survivors who were incarcerated, 18 hours a week providing crisis intervention over their statewide hotline, and 2 hours a week conducting outreach events. You would divide each staff time by function. So I really like this example to really drive home the point of that when you're doing FTEs, it's the job function, not necessarily the job title. So this one person is doing all these job functions, even though their job title may be something completely different. But when you're calculating those SASP FTEs, you're going to find for this particular person, it's going to be 0.5 FTE for counselor for doing those support groups, 0.45 for victim advocate for doing that crisis intervention, and 0.05 for outreach for doing outreach events. So some helpful hints for some SASP reporting tips. You're going to count victim, survivor, client, whatever word you would like to use there. You're going to count that person served if they requested grant funded services and your program was able to provide all of those services. Count them partially served if they requested grant funded services, but you could not provide all of them. You could only provide part of them, right? Count a victim not served if they requested grant funded services and your program could not provide any of those services due to programmatic issues. The victims requested services in 3 different times during a current reporting period. You should report that person only once, even though they came 3 different times. A victim requested counseling at the beginning of the reporting period, and then the same victim came back at the end of the reporting period and requested civil legal advocacy. Although this victim came twice and requested 2 different services, we're still going to only count them as one. If a victim requested services and then could not be located and no services were provided, the victim should be counted at all unless the person's on the waiting list. They're on the waiting list, they could be partially served as long as they have received some type of service. A victim withdraws from all grant-funded services the victim requested were being provided. This victim should be accounted as served even though your program did not complete the service. So an individual may have started therapy, let's say, and then they don't continue services for whatever reason. You would count them partially served. A few reminders. This is an annual report and it is due July 31st. You're only reporting grant-funded activities. We are only reporting on SASP-funded activities. For any questions on your SASP grant or SASP reporting, please contact your OCJP program manager. They would be happy to help. Thank you and have a wonderful day.